One year I spent several months in prayer asking God to show himself to me in whatever way he wanted me to know him. And I would often go into my closet and create that dark space and be in silence and solitude and just meditate on him and be quiet before him. And I would just ask him to show himself to me. However you want to, Lord, just show yourself to me. And sometime after that, I was here with the women from the leadership team of our women's ministry at church. We were here because I was hosting a meeting. We'd have a monthly meeting, and the meeting was wrapping up, and so we were all standing right here, standing in a circle, holding hands. And I remember the woman who was leading the prayer. She was praying in a very soft, very quiet voice, just closing us out in prayer. And as she prayed, suddenly tears began to come out of my eyes. I wasn't crying, but tears were flowing down my face. And at that same time, I had this feeling inside my body, inside my stomach. Started as a very small point, and then it radiated outward. And it was the feeling of a G-force, like when you're on a roller coaster and you go down really quickly, that G-force, that pull on your stomach, that's what it felt like inside my body. And then the lower half of my body, it felt like in my legs, it felt like something was weighing me down, pressing me down, just pressing, anchoring me into the floor. And I was having all these physical sensations. And I believed that God had answered my prayer. He was showing himself to me in a new way, in a unique way. And so when the prayer ended, I became a blubbering mess. I was crying. I was unable to formulate a sentence. I was just crying too hard, and I was trying to tell the women what had happened. But, it was something very new for me. I wasn't quite sure how to describe it. Didn't have the clarity that I have right now as I'm talking to you. And it was unable to compose myself. And so one of the more seasoned women on our leadership team, she said to the ladies that she believed I had had an encounter with God. And she asked them to leave, and so everybody left. And after they left, I actually came back to this space. And honestly, I was a bit nervous, and I came with trepidation because that was just so unusual. But I came anyway, and I knelt down and I prayed, and I was here for a time, and I just prayed to God. And I don't know why God chose to show himself to me in that manner, but it's something unforgettable for me. Sometime later, probably a year later, I'm not exactly sure of how much later, I'd have to look back at my journal and see if I can recall the dates. If I do, I'll put it in the description box. But sometime later, I was at church for a minister's meeting. This particular month, a female pastor from a local church here had been invited to speak on women in ministry. And I remember, part of our opening comments were about, not really focusing on differences between men and women. The call to women for women is not always that different than men. And, she shared some of her wisdom. And in the middle of her presentation, I remember, because this was kind of off topic, but she was looking up, and she said, sometimes when God speaks to me, it's like that feeling you get on a roller coaster. I get that roller coaster feeling. Sometimes that's how God speaks to me. And obviously when she said that, I resonated with that. That resonated with me. I connected to that because I'd had that roller coaster sensation. I never talked to the guest speaker about it. I didn't ask her any questions, but that just it stayed with me because someone else had actually experienced God in that way. And I will say that on occasion, it hasn't been often, but on occasion, God has used that sensation to answer a prayer or confirm something for me. And so if you watch the story about my call to ministry, you'll know that it was, in a sense, general. A lot of people, when they are called to ministry, or they hear that someone is called to ministry, they believe automatically, or they assume that that person is called to preach, and that's not always the case. Often it is, but not always. And so I did ask God, was preaching supposed to be a part of my calling? And I believe that one time when God gave me that roller coaster feeling, it was to confirm that preaching is to be part of my call. The way he did it was, one day I was here at home and I was watching a DVD of a program that had an astrophysicist. He was being interviewed, and he was describing God's creation of the universe and God's design for the universe. And he was making reference back to the book of Genesis, early chapters of Genesis. And he made a comment, something along the lines of, he didn't know why more ministers didn't preach on that passage. And when he said that, the roller coaster feeling occurred within me, and it was very strong and very intense. And I believe God was telling me that yes, preaching is to be part of what I have called you to do. And again, God's not spoken to me that way very often, but I am aware that sometimes he will move in that manner. I just want to state I feel compelled just because God does sometimes speak in unusual ways, but most of the time, the primary way God speaks to us is through his word. So this is always your starting point. This is your basis. This is your foundation. This book is your main source for knowing who God is, what he's like, what his character is like, and what he expects of you, and what kind of relationship he can have with you. So this is your starting point.